Hello, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about the cell cycle. Mostly what you need to know is that we're talking about something, and it's called, let's look right here, it's called MITOSIS, MITOSIS. So the cell cycle, we're talking about mitosis. Now what I want you to understand is that we are going to be learning about some things that are very similar. We're going to learn about something called mitosis, and then later on we're going to learn about something called meiosis, and they're very similar. So let's just talk about in general before we get into these slides, into this section of your notes. I'm just going to blank this for a second and talk up here about what we're talking about. So the first thing you need to know is that you're going to have something called mitosis, and you're going to have something called meiosis, okay? Now, mitosis is basically when cells divide to make new cells. Skin cells, hair cells, bone cells. These cells wear out and they need to reproduce to make new versions so that you can keep living. So that's for body cells. Right? Now the thing you need to know about meiosis is that meiosis is to make sex cells. You don't need to write this down yet. I'll get you to put it on the notes right away. Another thing you need to know is that mitosis is one cycle, whereas meiosis is two cycles. What do I mean by sex cells as well? I'm talking about making sperm and egg cells. Okay? That's what I mean by that. So that's the basic idea. Now, what do I mean by one cycle and two cycle? Well, basically in mitosis, when you're making body cells, which is every cell except sperm and egg. Sperm and egg use this, and yeah, I know it's a drag that it's only two kinds of cells in your whole body, and you have to learn all this stuff just for those two cells, but it's really important. It's how life is made. So, mitosis is every other cell, body, hair, intestine, every other cell you could imagine. Basically what happens is you have a cell, and by the end, you end up with two cells. So one turns into two cells, and you've made new cells. Now this one might die, and then you're left with that, and it'll recreate, and it'll keep making cells. But basically, one cycle. What happens in meiosis is you start with one cell, and it does something very similar, right? It makes two cells. Now we're going to be learning about this in about a week or two. So I'm giving you a preview. The most important thing is this is what we're focusing on today. But in meiosis, you're going to get this, and this is later on, and then they're actually going to turn into, they're going to like rip apart into 4 half cells. And this one you're just going to get 2 cells. So this would be a sperm or an egg, or a sperm or an egg, depending on if you're male or female and which cell was being reproduced. The other cool thing is, right, if say your mother makes sex cells and she makes eggs, and this is an egg, that could be an egg, that could be an egg, that could be an egg, and say your father did the same thing, right, and he had the same kind of thing where he made a half cell and that was a sperm, well, it can join up with half of your dad's info and half of your mother's and combine, and that would be you. So that's the first thing I want you to know, is that right now we're talking about mitosis, and we're going to talk about how one cell divides into two. So take a second. Your first goal here is to write that down right here. So everything you see up on the board, right under this slide in your booklet, write that down, and you can pause the video if you like right now. Now, the second thing that you need to know is that there is something I'm going to ask you right now that you're going to think is a little crazy, but have you picked your apples? Huh? Well, see, remember when I said that in mitosis, one cell becomes two cells? Okay, great. What I didn't tell you and what we're going to learn today is basically all of the steps here. What happens in this time to end up with two? It doesn't just go, boom, two cells. No, there is steps. There's actually 5 steps that you're going to have to learn. And you're going to have to know every step, what happens. You're going to have to know in general the order and what happens. So look at what you could do to memorize this is use this. I picked my apples today. Now everything that I'm writing up here, you're going to have to write down, excuse me, right down here. So everything on this board, put there. As you can see, your assignment for these notes is to annotate them. You're going to write all the things I tell you to write, everything I write on here, and you're going to put them in your notes, and you're going to send me pictures of your notes showing, hey, I've watched the video, I've taken notes, and I've added things. So let's carry on. And this is called interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. All right, so that's pretty cool. I picked my apples today. This is one step, another step, another step, another step, another step. Another thing that I want you to write, you're not going to know what this means just yet, but I would say write the word prep, write the word middle, write the word away, and write the word tear. Sorry. Write those down because look at this. Anaphase, away, metaphase, middle, prophase is prep, telophase is tear. That's a good way, if you could remember prep, middle, away, tear. I picked my apples today. You almost know everything that's going to happen. Now, we haven't talked about this yet. In the next few slides, we're going to get into some details. But I wanted you, again, to write everything that I put on the board right here. You can pause the video if you like. Put it right there. So take a look at this and write it down, and we'll keep moving. All right. So here we are, the cell cycle, as I called it, mitosis. Great. Now, there's a few things you want to see here. Why is cell division important? Why is it important that we know how this happens? Well, guess what? Any damage or injury that you do to your body, you need to repair it. Dead cells or damaged cells need to be replaced. There needs to be a process to make these new cells. Mitosis for most of the time, right? You need it to grow. It's not like your cells just get bigger as you grow. No, you need more and more of them. So as you're growing, your body needs to make more and more cells. That's another reason. So number one reason we need mitosis or cell division is to heal. The second one is to grow. And then reproduction, and I'm going to get you to write on this slide. Meiosis. And put underneath there, later on. We're going to do that part later on. So you should have some notes here. You should have some notes here. You should have that down. So that's why cell division is important. Let's talk about the cell cycle in general. there are 3 parts of the cell cycle. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't really like this slide that much. So honestly, you could kind of forget this, but what you need to know is interphase is before, mitosis is the main section, and that is the ending. Okay? But like I said, not too important for now. So let's talk about the first phase. I picked my apples today. Let's move over to the next slide. We are talking about, ladies and gentlemen, interphase. So what happens in interphase? Well, during interphase, this is what happens. Things start to grow. Okay, that's important. So obviously, guess what? If you're going to end up with one cell that's going to become 2, you're not going to end up with 2 tiny cells. This cell needs to get big, and then it's going to split into 2. So there's your first step. In interphase, if you're going to end up with 2, it's going to grow. Boom. Duplication of chromosomes, which means, remember when we talked about the nucleus of the cell where the chromosomes are, where all the DNA is? Well, guess what? That DNA doubles. Because think about it. If you're going to end up with 2 cells that are identical after this, you can't have like some DNA in one and some DNA in another cell. That doesn't work. Every cell needs a complete set of DNA. So the cell grows, and then all the DNA makes double copies. So that one copy will go to one cell and one copy will go to the other cell when you end up with 2 cells later. So growth, duplication of DNA, and more growth and preparation for cell division. So interphase is like the before. It's kind of getting ready. Once again, this slide, not too crazy important. Mitosis is the main part, and cytokinesis is the ending. This would be the picked my apples, and this would be the today. There are 2 parts, mitosis and cytokinesis. Mitosis is asexual reproduction. Body cells make exact duplicates of the original cell. That's what we're talking about. And cytokinesis is the end of it, where the cytoplasm is shared between the parent and daughter cells. Now, this part is kind of cool. That's going to be on a test, this part right here. But let's just pause the projector for a second and talk about deal with what we're talking about. So what we're talking about here is basically you're going to end up with the cell. It's going to get bigger, and then eventually it's going to split into 2, okay? Well, different things are going to happen, but interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase at the end, right? Basically what happens is at the end, you've gotten 2 blobs. Let's draw it like this. You've gotten 2 cells, right? And you've got a whole new set of DNA, and you've got mitochondria. You've got all this stuff in your one cell, and you've got the exact same thing here. You've got some parts, some organelles, and you've got them here, right? It's gone through interphase, prophase, metaphase, and anaphase. Check, check, check. And the last phase there, telophase, or we can call it on there, cytokinesis, which just means the cytoplasm has to pinch off there, and you end up with 2 cells. That's the telophase or cytokinesis. Not that crazy. Now, the next thing is, if you look at your slide right here, it is different in a plant or an animal. Why? Why is the last step different? What is it about an animal cell or a plant cell on the outside of it that's different? Oh, there's a cell wall in a plant as well. You can't forget about that. Remember, plants have cell walls. So this changes things up a bit. What we need to do now is we need to realize that in a plant, there's an extra step. So both of them, you've got your cells ready to divide, right? In an animal, going to pinch off. You don't need to be writing this down yet. But in a plant, it's going to do the same thing with the cell membrane, but it's also got this wall that's been around it the whole time, almost like an hourglass. And all of a sudden that pinches off, and there's one more step in a plant in cytokinesis, and that's when that wall grows across. So different in plant and animal. See, in animal cells form a cleavage, and in plants form a cell wall down the middle, leaving two cells. So that's kind of cool. Now, next up is this great little diagram, kind of showing what's happening, and you can kind of see. I'll turn the projector on as well. There we go. Bring that down. Interphase, getting ready. You should actually draw this getting bigger. Prophase, oh, it looks like some things are happening. What's happening in prophase? Metaphase, everything's at the middle. Anaphase, things are pulling away. And telophase, tearing apart. And I think I spelled telophase with an E before. It should be with an O. Telophase, my bad. So you could see the stages of mitosis. So one cell is going to end up breaking apart to becoming two cells. Kind of cool. Now let's talk about prophase. So interphase, it was getting ready, getting big. The DNA is doubling. Now we're moving on to prophase, right? So let's look here. Prophase, the chromatin or the chromosomes in the nucleus begin to condense and become visible in a light microscope as chromosomes, which means you can basically start to see the chromosomes. Normally when you're looking at a cell, you can't find the chromosomes with a microscope. They're too small with most microscopes. But at this point, the chromosomes are getting fat. Okay, so that's at the beginning. So that would be like early prophase. Chromosomes start getting big. They become visible. The nucleolus disappears. Oh, so that little area around the nucleus breaks away. Oh, okay, that's another thing to know. Good thing. And some fibers cross the cell to form the mitotic spindle. Don't get too worried about this, okay? But you can write spindle fibers right there. So there's 1, 2, 3 things that happen in prophase. So what are spindle fibers? See these little veins here? What those are going to do is, I like to think of spindle fibers as kind of like fingers that are going to go and they're going to grab the DNA. So they've come out of these centrioles. Don't worry about this. It's not something we're going to spend a lot of time on. So just kind of understand that there's these centrioles that start making spindle fibers. Because later on, the spindle fibers are going to grab the chromosomes. They're going to move them. Remember what I said? Middle, away, tear. Well, that all happens because of these spindle fibers. Spindle fibers are going to grab these chromosomes right away. They're going to grab the chromosomes. They're going to line them up at the middle. They're going to do a little dance. Then they're going to start to pull away. And at the end, they're going to tear apart and become a new cell. So spindle fibers are little fibers that are formed from centrioles, grab the chromosomes, and make them do their dance, as I like to call it. So that's the important things about prophase. Make sure you've gotten spindle fibers there. Now, what happens in metaphase? Well, if prophase was prepping, metaphase, I said, what was the word for metaphase? I said metaphase was the middle. And if you look, all chromosomes are lined up by the spindle fibers in the middle. Why do they move them all to the middle? Well, it's actually pretty cool. So the centrosomes are at opposite ends of the pole, right? The centrosomes or the centromeres are at the other ends. The chromosomes are now their most coiled and condensed, and they become arranged on a plane equal distance from the two spindle poles. Spindle poles, centrioles, whatever you like, but those are your spindle fibers, and they have lined up everything in the middle, the equator. Now it doesn't mean it's going to be like this. The equator could go this way. It's whatever splits the cell in the middle. Why does this happen? Why do we need to, line things up in the middle? Why does this happen? Because this is the last chance to make sure that everything's lined up. You've got one set for this cell that's going to become a new cell, one set of chromosomes for this cell that's going to become another one. Now, when we get in a few weeks to meiosis, which is to make sperm and egg cells, there's some pretty cool stuff that happens in the metaphases. But for this one, it's just lining up, making sure this side is going to have a proper set of chromosomes, and this side's going to get a proper set of chromosomes when they rip apart and become new cells. So, the centrosomes are off the opposite sides of the poles, and the chromosomes are most highly coiled and condensed. Now, if I go on to the next phase, it's I picked my apples. Apples means anaphase. The A in anaphase stands for pulling away, so you can already guess what's going to happen. Look at that! What do you know? The chromosomes are starting to pull away using those spindle fibers. Now, this one would be a copy of that one, and they call those sister chromatids because this was a copy and lined up at the middle. This chromosome is copied right there, so they're called sisters. That would be the sister chromatid there, sister chromatid there. They're the identical ones because right away this is going to cut. It's going to be one cell, two cells. These spindle fibers are going to disappear, things like that. But so what happens in anaphase? Well, in anaphase, the paired chromosomes separate and move to opposite sides of the cell. Chromosomes break at centromeres and sister chromatids are moved to opposite poles. Anaphase means away. That's all you need to know. Nothing too crazy, but it's kind of cool. So we've got one cell and it's becoming two and it's gotten big. It's made its DNA very large. It's lined up at the middle. It's pulled away. That's going to bring us to the next phase, telophase. Telophase is what we call the tearing phase in my shorthand. Telo with an O, my bad. So look at what happens at telophase. Chromatids arrive at the opposite poles of the cell and new membranes form around the daughter nuclei. So the chromosomes have moved apart. Membranes are forming around each nucleus. Nuclear membrane is reforming. The chromosomes disperse and are no longer visible. So these big, large chromosomes that were being grabbed by spindle fibers, now they become much smaller again and you can't really see them. Almost like they were back at the very, very beginning, right? They're becoming a new cell of their own. Pretty soon, this cell's going to go through mitosis and make some more. Same with this new cell. It just keeps growing and growing and growing. And the spindle fibers disperse and cytokinesis of the cell can also begin. So what does that mean? It means the spindle fibers go away and the cell will go through cytokinesis, which means it'll pinch off and you'll end up with two cells. That's the last step. Now, of course, if we're talking about an animal cell, you need to also say that, of course, if it was a plant cell, my bad. If we were talking about a plant cell, there would also be a wall that would grow right across the divide after. Not too bad. Now, this brings us to the last part of our assignment. I just want you to remember this. Please write this down again if you haven't yet. I picked my apples today. Middle, away, tear, prep, right, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase with an O because I always spell that wrong. So that's the basic idea. Now what you're going to have to do is follow along with me on the last page, and you are going to have to put some notes for each phase with me. So we could go back through our slides. I'll go back here, right? So interphase, what would I put by interphase if I was going to put a note? And this is something that you're going to have to take a picture of. This chart right down here, that's the most important thing I'm going to be looking at. Yes, it's good that you made a few notes, but I'm looking at this mostly to see if you've gotten to the end of the video and if you followed along. So now let's talk here. What would we say during interphase? I would say cell grows, chromosomes duplicate. So I would say cell grows big, chromosomes duplicate. I'd get that on there. Now we've got two here. Now it's tricky because on this sheet, there's early prophase and late prophase. So we've got to look at prophase and decide what's happening. What looks here looks like spindle fibers are forming there, and it looks like they're grabbing them in this one. So let's look at the prophase slide. Okay, chromatin and the nucleus begin to condense, and centrioles begin creating spindle fibers and some fibers. Okay, so what would we say? What would we say? I would say here, chromosomes become visible. Okay, and I would say centrioles and spindle fibers are formed. Now, you're going to hear centromere or centrioles or things like that. Centromeres. Don't get too worried about it. If it sounds like the word that you think it is, it probably is. I get a lot of emails saying, is the nuclear membrane the same as the nucleus membrane, or cell membrane is the same as the just membrane, things like that. So don't worry about the words too much. If it sounds like it, you're probably right. Now, some fibers cross the cell to form the mitotic spindle. All right, so I would say here, spindle fibers attach to chromosomes. Okay, which brings us to metaphase, and it's going to have something to do with everything being at the middle. So let's go to metaphase. The centrosomes are at opposite ends of the cell. The chromosomes are now condensed, become arranged in the middle of the cell, basically, right? So I would say centrosomes as opposite ends, and chromosomes lined up at middle. Cool. Now we're going to go to, of course, I picked my apples, anaphase. We're going to go to anaphase. And what happens in anaphase, you can see that this is going to start getting pulled apart. So the paired chromosomes separate. So chromosome pairs separate, I think. Yeah, that's a good way to write it. Yep. And get pulled apart. So I would circle the word middle. I'd circle the word apart there. And the last thing that you need to know is telophase. And what would you write for telophase? Chromatids arrive at opposite ends of the pole. So I would say chromosomes at opposite sides. What else would I say? Chromosomes no longer visible. Or big, I wrote. And the last thing I would say for telophase is spindle fibers go away and cytokinesis happens. And cytokinesis is the splitting of that cell. So that's the general idea. So what your assignment is for assignment, I believe this is 7, assignment 7, and this was lesson 7, was to take pictures of especially this last page that you did, right? Where you wrote all the notes that I told you, but to show me pictures of the notes that you took on the papers I gave you, and to send me that last page, and I'll give you a grade for that. Tomorrow we've got something different where we're going to be doing something called a micro viewer, and that's going to be something a little bit different. It's pretty cool. So good luck. See you soon.